Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I've seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and these are my first time experiencing these episodes.
And today we are reviewing Season 3, Episode 2, The Accused is entitled. Original air date is October 3rd, 2002. Director is Kenneth Fink. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker, Ann Donahue, and Elizabeth Devine. We begin, once again, as we often do, with shots of the Vegas Strip. Quite a few of them, like kind of bouncing around and then kind of like going to the casino and then going back into Vegas. And there's like a band, the Wallflowers, playing.
Is it the
well.
Wallflowers?
It's the Wallflowers. Yeah. I just double check on the second watch through because I was like, they sound really familiar. And then I looked the drummer like on the front of his like one of his drums has the Wallflowers, and I was like, oh.
I was assuming it was a real band, especially.
It is a real band. Yeah,
they give them a lot of face time.
Yeah.
And so, well, this is actually really complicated to measure because they're cutting a lot of times. Like they'll show like the Vegas Strip, and they'll cut to another shot of the Vegas Strip and another, and I'll just be like, all right, that was 3 scenes in 8 seconds, and that just goes into my little formula.
Yeah.
This time it was like, here's a few seconds, and then we're inside, and then we're back outside, and then we're back inside. Yeah. And so I actually had to go. I actually went back and like paused it every time it changed, wrote down all the timestamps.
Okay.
And counted up how many seconds.
Okay.
In scenes.
Yeah.
We open up pretty strongly. There's actually 6 scenes for a total of about 12 seconds.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I'm not here with microsecond precision or anything.
Yeah.
Which makes up the majority. We do have a couple more scenes, and I gave a few bonus points this episode. Obviously, we're opening up in a casino. We have another scene later on taking place on the Strip.
Yes.
And so, but we net out at 43 points, which is pretty high.
That's pretty high.
I thought we were going to cap out after like the first like 10 minutes. There's like no other scenes of the Vegas Strip. The last one is like a over the mountain shop.
Yes, yeah, they're coming over the mountain back into Vegas. Yeah,
like maybe that's like halfway through the episode, but like the rest of the episode there was like nothing else, and I was like, oh, we're so close. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, like 2 more scenes of almost any length or like 1 decent scene, we would have maxed out.
Yeah. All right, but I mean, still a good showing.
But very Vegas-y, I think, is important because I think there's some more themes this episode around like bringing along a new audience.
Yes, yeah. So we finally stay inside the casino. We go to a man at a table, and this is my spot. Guest star.
So let me say, I was like, this person looks very familiar. And then I was like, the whole episode, I was like, I don't know this person. And then when I did like my cursory check at the end, I recognize this person's name.
Yes.
I've never watched an episode of anything with him in it.
This is Chad Michael Murray, who was like a teen heartthrob. Like he was in all the like teen rom-coms, and people probably know him best from One Tree Hill. He was in 131 episodes of One Tree Hill as like one of the main characters, but he was also in Freaky Friday. He was in A Cinderella Story. So yeah, I think mine was similar in that like I've seen like a few episodes of One Tree Hill. I think I have seen Freaky Friday, but it was more like remembering him as a teen heartthrob than remembering him in it was
MTV.
It was more remembering him in that context than it was like remembering his like acting credentials.
I mean, I've definitely heard people say Chad Michael Murray out loud before, whether that was Joel McHale on Talk Soup or Mario Lopez on E! News or something, or like, you know, Conan O'Brien on The Tonight Show. I don't know. But like, I was like, I read his name. I was like, wait, if you asked me if I know who Chad Michael Murray is before I watched this episode, I said, yep. And then he would like, it's that guy. It's like, which one of the characters on the screen is it? I would have went, I don't know.
Oh, I just know the name. The name is just familiar.
None of these people, because I don't recognize any of them really. But like, or like, I guess it would have to be people, because I probably have seen him, and so like he would look familiar, and I was like, yeah, but I can't place this person. Yeah, he just kind of looks like every early 2000s, you know, like macho, not really macho, but like, you know, handsome man. Wannabe Brad Pitt.
Yeah, and we learn pretty quickly that in this episode, at least, he is Tom Haviland, a movie star. Another man approaches him and they have a very gross conversation about, does he want Italian? Does he want, aka women? Like, what flavor of women do you want? And he settles on Chinese, because there are 2 Asian women, I will say. And so then Tom is with these 2 women in a hotel room, like little like sexy. This is like, I feel, the beginning of CSI being a little more sultry.
Oh, really?
Like having moments of like, oh, see, we can be sexy.
There's been very few of those. I think I actually expected early on, maybe one of the first few episodes we had something, and I think I expected there to be a lot more of that because it's Vegas-y and they're trying to be risk. I think we had a whole conversation once, but this episode is trying to be so risque, and edgy. But there has been very limited of that, even when you had like a sex party in an episode.
It was still a very, very tame sex party. So this is like a little sultry scene. And then we transition to Grissom walking into the hotel room. Jim Brass is there. This is where we learn that Tom is saying that he found the victim, Kim, with her throat slash. Like he had relations with these women. He left. He came back. He found Kim with her throat slashed. And he's saying that he was with them from like 1 a.m. till 2 a.m., I believe. And then as Grissom's looking her over, he's like, she died before 1 a.m. Like, dude, like how her blood was like the stage of which her blood had clotted gave him a timeline. Would that hold up in court?
This is one of the few notes I have about like evidence in this episode.
Okay.
Where it's like, I don't know about you, but if I'm out at Vegas party, like drinking, do I really know what time it is?
Yeah.
Like he could say whatever time and you could be like, oh, we got him to commit to a time and then we like connected some other time to it. I feel like it would be so easy to get for a jury and be like, listen, it's a windowless, clockless room of Vegas. Of all places where it's hard to lose the time. He's drinking, he's hanging out, he's been gambling for hours. He doesn't know what time it is. He said 1:30. They say, well, if it was 1:30, he had to be here. He could have been wrong. He probably changed a time zone. Actually, maybe not from LA, but like, you know what I mean? Like, you could make all kinds of excuses. It's like, but even as a CSI investigator, you should be keenly aware. Witnesses forget and give bad information all the time.
All the time.
This guy has been drinking, he's partying, he's exhausted, it's late at night, he's traumatized. Maybe his time, he doesn't have like photographic timestamp evidence. And they do show a bunch of video evidence later on in the episode, but like they don't actually ever go to the extent of telling us later on, like, oh yeah, we see him leave the table at this time. We see him come back at this time. Because like, that's like exact. And then you can use your medical knowledge to establish a time of death window. And then you could sort of use those two things to place a person. So it felt like they didn't want to do that. And so they were just like, they also wanted to have like these like conflicting statements that comes up shortly. And it was like, I'm like, this is the one thing I think that like, and then spoiler alert, there's a lot of emphasis on this episode about like having evidence hold up in court. And they don't even really come back to this line of questioning or this timeline at all. And I was like, this is the one thing where I feel like there's way more legitimacy to like throwing this piece of information out. And I think that in the real world, all that other stuff I talked about using cameras and timestamps, you would really just use that to establish the timeline and figure out what you need to do. But they kind of like gloss over it in this one early scene. And I guess they just wanted to focus on cooler things than like a camera
flashier things and a camera timestamp.
But otherwise, I have very few gripes with the evidence of this episode, and I think that important. I already sort of gave away the goose here, right? That we're going to focus a lot on evidence and the quality of evidence and how you present evidence. And I think they did a pretty good job because it's sort of like one of the main characters of the episode.
Yes, I agree. We also learn in the scene that the other woman, Tanya, is quote unquote gone. So Tom was just like, oh yeah, I came back, she's gone. I don't know, like, she's not here. But he also claims that Kim said, well, actually this comes up in a moment. Never mind, I'm jumping ahead. So we go to Tom signing, like giving autographs to the officers. He's all buddy-buddy with them. Warwick is there. Warwick knows that Grissom does not recognize Tom. He's like, there's no way you know who this guy is. Like, you're so out of touch that you don't know who this guy is. So they ask him if he touched the victim after he found her. Like, hey, when you came in and you saw her, did you touch her? Did you move the body? And he's like, adamantly, like, nope, I had no contact. To be honest, I was like a little, shocked. And this is where he tells Grissom and Warwick that Kim did speak to him before she passed away and said that Tanya killed her, like committed this murder. And you could tell right off the bat that Grissom and Warwick are like, really? Like, is that so? So they ask him.
That's a bit of a departure too. Like, he's like, I found her dead. Oh, but then she talked to me.
Yeah, but then she talked to me. And so they ask him to see like his hands, and because they want to see if he has any blood on his hands. And they do end up finding blood on the back of his hands, like on the nail bed on the back of his hands. And they're like, oh, like you washed your hands, but like you didn't pay attention to the back of them. This brings us to credits. We're then with Jim Brass, Grissom, and Warwick. Jim Brass, along with a few officers, are, walking Tom like out of the hotel room through the casino, like presumably to like be booked. The press is there, right? They're asking a ton of questions. They're taking pictures. They're pushing Jim Brass to give them more information. He's pretty coy. You can tell that like Jim Brass knows how to handle this. He's very like, all right, I'll give you like a few little bits, but I'm not gonna like show my hand here.
I could have put this guy on like the pedestal of like Tom Cruise. I feel almost as like mostly because he's to say like, oh, he does his own stunts or something.
Yeah.
And like, it really would be like that kind of mob scene.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like very quickly outside a hotel room. So
yeah, I feel like this was believable. Like this wasn't a like, oh, this is a weird scene. Like to me, I was like, yeah, this is fair. Like this makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like, but like that's like that can be really intimidating. I feel like so. Yeah, I think Brass does a really good job just being very like matter of fact. Let's get through this.
Yeah, so they walk him away. Sarah, Catherine, and Nick are now there in the casino. We learned that they hired Marjorie Westcott to be his lawyer, who's this like high power attorney. She plays a very pivotal role, especially later on in this episode. Grissom and Nick are at the casino. Nick goes to process the table. Grissom very poignantly is like, you're doing this. Like, I am not going to be collecting evidence. You're going to be collecting evidence. And I just want to point this out because this
super important
becomes very, very important later. And the first time I watched it, I didn't quite pick up on this. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, I see what you're doing here. So they're laying the foundation very early and very consistently in this episode.
So I will say that first time I watched this, I was like, that's really weird. And I thought about it for a second and I went, oh, maybe like it's for X reason. And then like it was for Y reason. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah. We go to Sarah. She's taking pictures of the bed. Hank walks in. They have to reposition the bra because he admits to having moved it because it was like in the way of trying to like perform life-saving acts on the victim.
Do you think they make way too big of a deal of something that I assume
happens all the time?
All the time.
All the time.
They're always complaining about the firemen putting out the fire or the paramedics. Yeah. And like the CSI people, they get upset by it. So like the scene and like the sorry and no, you don't have to apologize, like that, like the whole exchange that they're about to go through. I don't have a problem with that, but like I actually would just assume that this is very
common
and not super important to
I mean, because it seems like there's a very specific protocol for when this happens. So this must happen enough because there is very specific protocol of like, okay, well now I got to take like before and after pictures. Oh, and I have to like file this specific log to like document that this happened. So it has to happen enough if there's protocol around it.
It's also the most meaningless piece of evidence.
Yeah, it plays absolutely zero impact on the case whatsoever.
Yeah.
Catherine enters the room. There's no blood in the bathroom, but that leads her on a nice little adventure. So she's in the hallway. She finds a utility closet. Nick is processing the table. A worker from the casino is like trying to hurry him along. We go back to Catherine.
I actually do think the end of this scene is very much for show, where like Nick, or maybe it's actually a later scene, but he spends a bunch of time when he's finally done at the table.
Did they all rush back in?
He like does this like let him
Yeah,
all
like, come
in
on
thing.
in.
I was like, you still have evidence laid out on the table. You have to put these back into bags. You have to do all this stuff.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, what a weird. I didn't realize it was going to come back up. But also,
Yes,
like,
it does come back up.
I mean, Nick, you could have dropped the ball big time. You could have held that table for as long as you wanted.
Right. This is a major, like, you know that this is going to get a lot of
And
attention. Like, this case is a gigantic case.
they're in casinos all the time. They were in casinos last week.
Right.
And guess what? No one was allowed to play at that table until they were done.
Nope. We go back to Catherine processing the utility room. She's like finding blood in the sink. She finds a footprint, so she takes that. We go back to Nick. He finds blood on the table. He then notices the camera, and evidently, I guess the camera's going to fix everything, because that's when he does the little like, "Hey, you guys can all come back in." It's because he like looks up and notices that there's a camera focused right on this specific table. We go to Warwick driving. He comes upon an accident. He gets out, like calls for medical assistant, like assists one of the victims of the car crash.
I thought this was going to be the B plot for like 5 minutes.
Oh, that's fair. I knew it wasn't, just because obviously I've seen this episode multiple times, but I can see why you would be like, oh, this is going to like lead somewhere else. It does. Well, I mean, it does lead somewhere else, but it does not lead to a B. It ties back into the main plot that we have here. Grissom is with Doc Robbins. They're examining Kim. They are starting to think that she was the weapon used to inflict her wounds could be a corkscrew, because they're thinking like this is probably an attack of opportunity. They would just like grab something that's in the room, and because of where she was stabbed, she had paralysis of the throat, so she would not be able to talk, which is very important because of something that Tom said earlier. Then we have the team watching a newscast. They're kind of going over Kim's murder, like what they know so far. Greg Sanders enters with the blood results, and the blood that was on that they took from Tom's hand is Kim's. So, not looking great for Tom at the moment. He has Kim's blood on his hands. Then the newscast goes to Marjorie, the attorney, and she's claiming that the evidence is contaminated. And this is the evidence that Warwick collected and delivered to Greg Sanders because he left it in the car unattended while he helped the victim of the car accident.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the contaminated, you think like, well, Warwick, you were covered in blood, this victim's blood.
Yeah.
But then I think technically in about 8 seconds, they're about to have also raise the chain of custody problem.
Yes.
Which is that you left in your car unattended. So,
yeah.
And it was unlocked, so like anyone else could have had access to it. Your eyes were not on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That does lead us into the next scene. Catherine, Grissom, and Warwick are with the, like, I assume prosecutor. They never like say who this guy is, but I assume.
Yeah, he's the prosecutor.
He's a prosecutor, right?
He's prosecutor for CSI is his official credit in IMDb.
Okay, so
played by Michael B. Silver, which is not a Spot the Guest Star, but I'll be honest, I think he's a missed Spot the Guest Star.
Oh, okay.
Not if you looked at a more modern photo of him, he might look more familiar.
Okay, go. Let me look.
He's been in some.
I mean, his name is pretty awesome.
Shows.
I'm like Michael B. He does look really familiar. I'm trying to think.
He was in 13 episodes of Royal Pains, which as a show I know about. That was on USA. I've never watched it.
He's in Legally Blonde, which I have seen.
I don't know if he's a big character in Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
He's not in like the top 10 characters, so I'm going to say no. But yeah, I think he's like one of those people who's in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, he is in a lot of things. Like he's definitely that guy.
He's in 5 episodes of Suits, so I've definitely seen him in Suits. That's probably
okay. I haven't seen. I've only seen like 1 or 2 episodes of Suits. So
young Michael B. Silver did not ring any alarm bells, so he was not spotted.
Yeah. Oh, he was also in Heroes, because every Spot the Guest Star that we have is in Heroes.
I keep not checking to see if there's like a. I assume I could look this up somehow if a casting director is the same person or a director or a writer, like that there's some connection, because these shows are actually like years apart from each other.
Oh, he's also in CSI Miami.
So like these people are ending up in Heroes. The Heroes people aren't ending up in this episode.
Yeah.
But they're also close enough that maybe they're just like, these are the people who are in a bunch of stuff around then.
Yeah, so we're not going to count this as a Spot the Guest Star because we didn't really quite get there while watching it. But I do agree with you that it's probably a missed one.
Yeah, it's a missed the guest star.
It's a missed the guest star,
which normally people just tweet us about.
Yeah, which is fine. Tweet us, let us know. As they're having this walk and talk, though, there's several moments where you can tell that Grissom can't hear. It's like muffled, like they're talking, but you can't really hear what they're saying. And then Grissom is sort of like debriefing the team that Tom's attorney wants a speedy trial and that the prelim is going to be in less than 72 hours. So they like do not have a lot of time to process this evidence and like make their case that he should be prosecuted. Grissom also lets them know that they're bringing in a forensic scientist onto the case, Dr. Philip Gerard, who was Grissom's mentor. So like Grissom worked for him for many years. So there's a personal connection there. Jim Brass and Grissom have a walk and talk. We learn that Raymond, the like Tom's like buddy who got him the girls, is willingly coming in to give a blood sample. Nick and Greg Sanders have a short scene where we learn that the blood that Nick collected off of the dice is a combination of Kim's and Tom's. And so Nick now needs to go through the like surveillance tape to see where he like to see if they can capture him like blowing on the dice to show that that's how the blood got transferred. Sarah and Grissom are like investigating the sheets. They find a waffle pattern on the sheets. And this is where Grissom is supposing that Kim was like a secondary victim. Like her throat was slashed just to shut her up. Like she wasn't the main target. And that the blood pattern, one of the blood patterns that they're looking at is Tanya's. Dr. Gerard enters and he's starting to question them, specifically more so Sarah, about moving the bra. And Sarah's like, hey, I followed protocol. I took the pictures. I logged it. You know, like she's like, I don't know what you want me to say. I did everything right. But his concern really isn't with her following protocol in that sense. It's her relationship with Hank. Like, oh, did you help your like boyfriend out by moving the bra to like where he wanted it to be? And
which
again,
is such a farcical idea that he would. She said something like, I didn't want the bra to be anywhere.
And it also, as you pointed out, never plays. It is not a piece of evidence that plays a factor into this conviction or into this decision to prosecute in any way, shape, or form.
I think in some ways, and I'll be honest, I'm playing a little devil advocate here. They're using this as a way to expose to you an example of what the defense is doing to undermine the CSI.
Yeah.
And also they've chosen, he specifically has chosen to do this for something that he knows isn't germane and therefore doesn't want to bring up in court.
Yeah.
So we're not going to spring this on you in court, but let's rattle your cages now.
Let's get you nervous now. We're then have Grissom with Catherine. Catherine's letting him know that the defense wants like proficiency results for all the CSIs, but Catherine's test is on appeal because there was like one question that she said was ambiguous. And Grissom's, and she points this out several times. I like that Catherine holds Grissom accountable because we know about Grissom's hearing loss, but the team does not, or we're led to believe the team doesn't know.
Correct.
And
I don't.
So she's like, Eckley must be rubbing off on you because he's not like processing evidence. He's not like being an active participant in this case. And so this is one of the times that Catherine's calling him out on, not really being an involved boss.
Correct. He's like, in a way, in a time when he should be.
Yes, this is definitely this is a high profile case. You already know that the defense is trying to rattle the team. You really should be there for them, and he's at least at this point not showing up in the way that the team needs him. Warwick is then with Grissom. He's been served. They want his shirt from the accident, but he threw it away.
Which
then
I actually I can get throwing it away because it's not related to the case.
Yeah, you helped a totally different victim out.
But later on in the episode, they show him searching for it in the
trash.
In the trash, but in the CSI headquarters. And I would have thought you would brought it home, washed, done. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or do they have special biohazard trash or something?
Maybe
they were throwing it out. Yeah. It's just sort of the idea they would throw it out in the break room.
Yeah, just
don't remember where you threw out this blood-soaked T-shirt.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of it's a good little thread, but at the same time it was I was just the whole time I was where did you throw out this T-shirt?
Yeah, what happened to this shirt?
How willy-nilly are you with blood-soaked T-shirts?
Yeah.
Are you not a CSI? Do you not know that, these things can come back to you?
Yep, and they do. Dr. Gerard is then with Nick. Grissom enters. They're looking over security footage, and they see Raymond leaving with a hard shell bag, which probably big enough to fit a body in. Grissom and Jim Brass are then with Ray and his lawyer, which someone lawyered up. Our last episode was like, you should lawyer up, and I'm glad.
I mean, he was like, do I get a first phone call early on? Right?
Yeah. I am glad that people are taking our advice and getting lawyers. And Grissom opens up the bag and realizes that it's been cleaned with a solvent, which brings us to Grissom spraying the bag with luminol. And it lights up, and Nick and Dr. Gerard are there. But then the luminol cross reacts with the bleach, so they're not going to be able to like get a sample and prove that it's like Tanya's or anybody else's.
Is that like a thing that's ever come up in the episode? Any episodes before? Okay.
No.
Is that like a real thing? I know you know a little bit more than I do.
I don't remember this ever coming up again. So, I don't know. Grissom and Dr. Gerard then have a little walk and talk, and this is where Grissom's like, what happened to you? Basically, like, you're a sellout. You sold out. I can't believe that you're, basically, like, going against evidence to line your pockets. Greg Sanders then walks into Grissom's office. He's whispering because he thinks Dr. Gerard is still there, and Grissom's like, he's not here. Can you please talk normal?
But even if he was, like, that's almost worse.
Yeah, I know, because then they're going to think like, oh, you're purposely like hiding evidence from us, which is against the law. Sarah enters. Greg Sanders is saying that he like tested the swatches that Sarah took from the sheets and that, he found Kim's blood on there. That's not surprising. But some of the swatches came back as XY, and they're not Tom or Ray's. And so Sarah's immediate thought is, oh, great, like there's another man in the room, like, we don't have time to like really get our heads around this evidence. Grissom, I think, has already figured out what happens, which is revealed pretty soon after this.
Do you think that, really?
Yes, because he says, or it's motive.
Oh.
So I think that I think at this point he figured it out.
I read that as he came back to the room, the girls were in the room
with another
man, maybe even his manager. I think it was the person I was thinking it could be.
Yeah.
And like then he got pissed off, right? That they were
with another man
else, and they were going to hang around the room and whatever machismo reason that he needed.
Yeah.
That's how I was reading that. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I lean towards Grissom already sort of figured this out, but Nick enters. Tanya has been found. We go to Jim Brass, Grissom, and Nick at a golf course. Dr. Gerard is there as well. Okay, I'm going to have some words here.
You're not some choice vocabulary?
So, Nick tries to call Grissom over, and Grissom's like, just tell me what you need to tell me. Like,
yeah, because he's still avoiding getting involved.
Yes. He's like, just tell me what you need to tell me. And he's like, beans and Franks. Beans and Frank. Meaning, Tanya is biologically a male.
Has a penis
and testicles.
About.
Well, that's what it's so. Just say the victim has a penis.
Yeah.
There's non-crass ways to go about saying this.
Probably not the Austin Powers way either, but
no. And this is where Grissom tells his what he thinks Tom's motive for the murder is that, here's this like macho, I do my own stunts, Hollywood actor, very cares about his appearance, what people think about him. And he, goes up to this hotel room with what he thinks are two women. And, as he's, going down on one of the women, he realizes finds a surprise there and flies into a rage and kills her. And I actually feel like this episode, other than I just hate that, I just find the beans and Franks are just so
other
childish.
Than that one line,
I feel they're very mature about this. They're not like, ooh, gross, like Tanya's a man, or
they don't dwell on it. They don't make a big deal out of it.
No,
they matter of fact it.
Yeah, Grissom's just hey, this is motive, right?
And
Tom.
That's real motive. I'm not going to comment on Tom's reasonableness.
Right, it's a real motive.
Don't murder people reasonably.
No,
but it is definitely a real motive.
There's plenty of violence against trans individuals in scenarios like this.
Yep.
So I feel
Also,
like they actually handled it very well, other than the Beans and Frank.
There's one through line that they don't really address through this episode. Like one sort of like question mark that I had. But this is part of the puzzle, which is like, why did they get rid of one of two bodies?
They mention at one point that maybe Raymond didn't have enough time to go back and get the second one. Like something happened
before what? That's what I mean. We never learned.
We never learned why. No, yeah. They do note like, oh, like you didn't have time to go back and get the second one. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what led to like.
But I think that it's important that there's actually several reasons why it was important to get rid of this body first.
Yes. Oh, very important to get rid of this body first. No, Grissom has a great line, and I think it's right here. He goes, oh, it's the Hollywood truth that what does he say? Oh, it's such a good line. It's something about like not being caught with a boy or not being caught with a man.
Yeah. The end careers by getting caught with it's like boys in one situation and
women in another. Yes. Situation. And I can't remember what the girl part of it is, but it's basically like, don't get caught having a sexual relationship with a man. Like that is very, very bad press if you're like a Hollywood actor. And this is another moment where Grissom is very concise that Nick is the primary on this. Like Nick is the one to collect evidence. This is on Nick to do this. And then we have a short scene with Dr. Gerard talking to Grissom about his mom. Because again, he like worked for him. I guess he met his mom at some point. And this is where Dr. Gerard kind of drops the bomb that he knows that Grissom is losing his hearing. That he's like genetically predisposed to this and he's losing his hearing. Grissom walks off after this conversation. There's another moment of hearing loss. Like he's watching some golfers and it's all like muffled. And then it comes back into focus.
The line, by the way, never get caught with a dead girl or a live boy.
Thank you. Okay. Perfect. Yes. Never get caught with a dead girl or a live boy. Yes. This was like such a good line. I don't know why I didn't write it down because I was like, that's a really, really good line. So Grissom is then looking at the waffle pattern on the sheets. Sarah enters. She's getting ready to go to court. And this is a moment where Grissom's a really good boss in that, and like also sort of a good friend in that he's like, hey, like whatever happens in court today, like it's not because you have a relationship with Hank. Like you deserve to have a life and it's okay for you to be dating. And like, if something goes wrong, it's not because you have a life. Like you have every right to have a life outside of here.
There's also been this tension right between Sarah and Grissom, and like he's sort of like also like being like, I'm not bothered.
Yeah, that you have this relationship.
That you had this relationship.
Yeah,
where there's a very big surprised look on his face when he became aware of this in the scene earlier, right?
Yes.
Yep. He clearly had no idea, and that they've definitely been building sort of the attraction level between those two, the coyness, the playfulness, the flirting, to a lesser extent. And so it's like, like I'm cool with this. I'm cool with everything. This isn't the case has to come first. Everything has first. This is no, you did everything right.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Just go out there and keep doing your job, and whatever happens, happens.
Yes. Yeah. We then have a Catherine and Nick walk and talk. Catherine's giving Nick advice about court. Catherine then sees Warwick. Warwick cannot find the shirt. This is where he's like digging through the trash in the break room trying to find a shirt. Nick enters court. Dumpster. Yeah. Nick enters court. He's sworn in, and then he exits. And we learned that he forgot to put the identifiers on the dice photos. And so we have like a scene of him like looking at the photos, trying to pick like which die it is that like had the blood on it. And
I have two questions. One specifically about the scene and one about this series of scenes. Specifically with the scene, he gets all these photos. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure out if there's supposed to be like all the different photos he took of all the different dice, because there were a whole bunch of them laid out.
Yeah.
And they're trying to say like, well, without like the evidence thing, like how can you be so certain which one Tom rolled and at which timestamp?
Yeah.
Like what if they got mixed up?
Right.
What if he had her blood on his breath at 11 o'clock and not at 1:30? Yeah. Who knows where that came from? Which is farcical, but that's the kind of things you do in a courtroom especially when your client is guilty. And so that was like one thing I wasn't sure. And the other thing is, are they legitimately at trial right now?
No, this is the are we going to move forward with prosecuting?
Yeah, it's like we're
preliminary hearing.
Typically when you're trying to indict okay, yeah, they're trying to indict someone. So like the person they're trying to convince is the judge.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of their arguments are made like they're trying to convince a
A
jury.
jury. Yeah.
And there's no jury in the
There's
room,
no
as far as
jury
I
in
can
the room.
tell.
No, it's just the judge at
and it's
this
a
point.
tiny little room, which if you were a Hollywood actor, like they would have to have a big courtroom. There'd be a lot of people in there. It's obviously just a set, but I was like, all right. I was like, this isn't the actual trial, right?
No, this is not the actual
This is just
trial.
like, do they have sufficient evidence to
move forward with
hold? Because they don't. I think it's supposed to be. Maybe it's his arraignment. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not gonna pretend to know. Maybe I need to learn a little bit more about the steps along the way. But yeah, for sure, it's sort of like trying to decide if they're going to actually go forward the case or it's going to throw it out for not having sufficient evidence, I guess.
Yeah. We stay in the court for a while. Like, we have several scenes in the court here. Warwick is in court. The shirt disappeared. So Marjorie's trying to basically say, like, oh, foul play is afoot because this shirt just magically disappeared. And then Marjorie also brings up about his gambling problem. So they're attacking the credibility of the CSI members. We have a short scene with Grissom looking at pictures of Tom. We then go to Sarah on the stand. Marjorie asks about Hank, so they do bring Hank up again. And this is where Sarah has the line about, like, I didn't have any buy-in as to where the bra goes. Like, I didn't care. It didn't matter to me where it went. Like, I moved it back to where he said it was because, like, that's where he said it was. Like, I wasn't like trying to make something happen with the evidence.
Yeah, there's a larger sort of tack on here, right, where they're trying to insinuate that it's actually Grissom who she's trying to impress.
Yes, so like she goes on to say that she shared a romantic gesture with Grissom and this is a legit callback. Like, this happened in an episode.
I didn't actually write that down,
Oh yeah, this is a callback.
New callback.
So this is a callback, and where there is a scene where the two of them are outside of an apartment complex, and she like wipes dust from his face because they were like demoing an apartment trying to find a body. And this is where Marjorie...
Oh, that's the one where the guy has the body in his wall.
He ends up having it in the water heater in the basement, but they think it's in the wall. It's the one with the nose where the guy was spraying blood all over the apartment.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And he demos it for them.
Yep.
Oh, it's such a good call. Oh, man.
Yep. So,
drop the ball.
So this was a legitimate callback, and this is where she's saying, kind of taking the focus away from Hank and putting it on Grissom and saying, wouldn't you go to the extreme to impress your boss who you have romantic feelings for, essentially. We then go to... Oh, sorry.
So this is, I think, the thing, like I was kind of getting to earlier, is like these kind of character attacks.
Yes.
I don't think they work on judges. Like, judges are supposed to be sort of impartial, and they understand the complexity. Like, they see crimes and situations so many times, whereas your typical juror is like the first or second time they're ever in a court room, and like they're easier to persuade with this sort of non-thing. The judge would be like, is supposed to be the one who's weighing whether or not something is germane to the case. Like, he's going to be like, yeah, that doesn't matter,
right?
Like, it's like, and so it's like, that's why I kept getting so confused. And I think what it is they want to have that conversation with the audience.
Yes.
Like, these are the things that would be important to a jury.
This is hey, if you haven't noticed it, we're teasing a romantic relationship between Grissom and Sarah. And hey, if you forgot, Warwick has a gambling problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean more that they want to have those moments like, this is how evidence gets used and brought up in court. Okay. Right? And to sort of like, as I said, bring your audience along, new audience. Why are we so focused on the evidence in the next, 20 something episodes of this season every time we're going to have a crime?
Yeah.
It's because it's going to end up in court like this. And we actually haven't really had a court scene yet. No. And so this is the first time, even for viewers who've been like me, who've been watching along, and they just go off to court whenever somebody apparently can't film today. The actor is in court that day. But like, this is the first time we're actually seeing it happening. So it is cool to see that. And they had that scene with Nick and where he's like, Catherine, I've done this like 1,000 times. She's like, well, I've done it more or whatever. Right. Because they are doing it all the time. It is a normal part of their job. So it's really cool to be seeing it, but I do think that they were staging this from a timeline, like the way they wrote the episode, like they're not at a trial.
They're not at a trial.
But they're pretending they're at a trial.
They are pretending they're at a trial. So we continue with these court scenes. Catherine is now on the stand. And Marjorie brings up that she used to be an exotic dancer. And I love Catherine because she's like, oh, you used to be an exotic dancer for a living. And she's like, yeah, good living. Like, I made good money being an exotic dancer. It's also like, you're in Vegas. She had a legal career. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she wasn't a drug dealer. Like, she was an exotic. Oh, no. Again, I feel like this is very of the times where it's like, ooh,
and
like
I think even
exotic
today,
dancer.
I think even today, depending on where you live in the jury's made
there's still going to be a lot of like.
No offense to anyone, but your typical like older, grandparent age person probably still would have on average have a negative opinion of an exotic dancer.
No, I agree. I agree entirely. And Marjorie also brings up her proficiency test. We then have Catherine walking over to Grissom, and this is where she just flat out tells him that he's a lousy leader. Like, you're not there for the team. We're taking all these hits. You're not in the pit with us. And Grissom, instead of acknowledging this, is like, I need full body pictures of Tom. Where can I get full body pictures of Tom?
Where can I find pictures of Tom Everland? Which is like, we are in internet age, really early internet age. But like, I don't think we're early enough that the average person would think like today, if we're like, we're going to get full pictures of Henry Cadville.
Yeah.
You'd be like, Google him.
Yeah, just Google Henry Cadville. You can. There's plenty of pictures of him.
But I like that they go to these tabloids.
Yeah, so they go to like these magazines, they go to these tabloids, they're flipping through those, and then Grissom like sees a specific one, and Catherine looks at it, and you can tell like on her face she's like, oh, like this is it. And Grissom's like, okay, I guess I'm going to court. Which, why Catherine couldn't be the one to testify to this? I know from a dramatic standpoint,
because she just said you have to get in the pit with us, right? He's doing the being a good boss thing for once.
He is. So we go to Grissom on the stand. He's showing the waffle pattern in the blood, and is trying to say basically this is going to like break the case. This is going to be like one of the biggest connectors that they have. But then Marjorie is asking him a question. He can't hear her. So
it's like probably an important moment where he first shows him on the stand, and his mentor is whispering to the lawyers.
Yes,
and it's basically because he knows that he likely can't hear. So basically, talk quietly, I think is what he mouths or something.
Yeah.
When you ask questions, he has a hearing problem. You can't hear him say that, but I think the idea is like he's turning on Grissom. That's an important moment in the episode. Is that he's throwing his own mentee under the bus here.
Yes. And so Marjorie asks him a question. Grissom can't hear. He asks her twice to repeat, and this is where I think we're led to believe that he can read lips. That like he never actually hears her quite say it. I think because they focus on her.
Correct.
Like they like zoom in on her lips.
Doesn't he have this as part of a conversation with the doctor?
Yeah, that he can. Yeah,
he's like, reading lips can only get me so far. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like I was assuming we were supposed to know he could read lips.
Yeah. So then he figures, he like realizes the question, and he explains how the scar on Tom's knee matches perfectly to the blood pattern on the sheet, which means that he was like kneeling, in the blood on the sheet, because it was like, oh, knee to like the step that he got the scar on
like
to the blood sheet.
Bit here too.
Yeah, there's
uncovering this like hidden, like this was one of the things that would be in a tabloid. If Grissom could have broke it to the Inquisitor news or whatever their
database for scars. It's not a discipline. Yes, but it's unique to the accused. He says he got it in a stunt on his last film. According to Mr. Haviland in his statement, and I quote, "It happened when I was rappelling down the Alps, firing an AK-47 with my free hand." But he actually got it tripping on his way into the wardrobe trailer.
Objection. There's no question of the witness here, Your Honor.
Your Honor, it's a preliminary hearing. May I?
They're called Us Weekly and been like, oh yeah, no, it wasn't an accident stunt that he got this scar
No,
from.
he tripped coming out of
He
his trailer.
tripped on the set and like a big old scar,
Yeah.
too.
Yep. And so this seals the deal. This is enough to move forward with, deciding to, formally charge or indict Tom. Afterwards, Dr. Gerald approaches Grissom, trying to be like, oh, hey, good job. And Grissom's like, oh, my mom says hello, and like signs hello. And then the team like walks out triumphantly, which leads us to the end of the episode.
I should have signed FU, but
I know.
better. My mom says hello.
Hello. We just did the sign for FU, but
I did the Friends reference sign. But
oh yeah.
The Ross Monica FU.
Yeah. So Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
I like today's episode quite a bit. There's a lot of new stuff in here. I think on the second watch through, I had a much more keen appreciation for what they were trying to do through the episode, as sort of alluded to. They're bringing you along. They're getting up a new audience. I sort of said that last episode. You made a very salient point, which was that the things they're drawing out on the stand. Oh, Hank is your boyfriend. Warwick has a gambling problem. Catherine was the exact answer. This is free catch-up time for everybody else.
Yeah.
Right? It's pertinent to what they're talking about. So it's not filler, but it catches up anyone who doesn't know these things.
Right.
Grissom has a hearing problem, which I guess is a fairly new piece of information, but like his mother is deaf. Right.
Yep.
That was a big piece of information from the earlier scene. So they do a wonderful job of that. It was all very enrapturing to watch. I felt like I took very few notes when I first watched through because I was just enjoying watching it. I was just in it, which is always a great sign. At no point was I like blown away over the moon about the episode. So I ended up giving it like 4 out of 5.
Okay, that's fair. Okay.
And it wasn't that easy it was actually surprisingly not that easy to rewatch. So I just gave it a play instead of a rewind.
Okay.
But it is probably one of the more on the cusp. So I think we're not going to have too many 4 out of 5 fives that aren't replays.
Yeah, that aren't replays.
But yeah, I like this episode. This is like, I feel like if my friend told me about CSI and I just watched episode 1 and then watched episode 2, they were both pretty good. I feel like they kind of taught me a lot about what evidence is. You know what I mean? Like how they collect evidence, why they collect evidence, why these group of people are important compared to like the Law and Order crowd.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what role does the CSI play versus
the NYPD Blues or something, right? So yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I'm not sure I just can't quite put it in the rewatch category because I just think it's a little dry.
Yeah, so for me, I think I'd probably do like 3.5 out of 5 for this one. Like, it was a good episode. It was a one case episode, which is not my favorite. Mm-hmm. And I understand why they set it up this way, like, because the more important part of this, I think, as you mentioned, is why is evidence important and like what role does the CSI play? And that's more of the focus of this episode. There wasn't like a big reveal that Tom was the killer. It was basically like, yeah, he killed them. Like, there was
very early
on. Very early on, you're like
at the back of the nails. Basically, you knew it was it.
Yeah, which I tend to enjoy. I think I find a little bit more satisfaction in the like, oh wow, really, like that person. And for this, this episode was like, no, he killed them. And the main body of this episode is watching how CSI collects and processes and then testifies to evidence in order to secure an indictment. So yeah, I think I don't know. There's just something that doesn't quite
I think
fit for the episode, but it's not a bad episode. And similar to you, I would say play. Like, the second watch through was definitely like a little bit of a grind. I'll also say like I have a different opinion now that I take notes so that I can kind of like guide our conversation as to like where we are in the episode. That this jumped around a lot, so it was like a pain in the butt to take notes for this episode because I was like, this
for one crime. That's almost worse too, right?
Yeah.
Because and I also like, you're very right. Like, some of the best episodes I think about have those like WTF moments.
Yes. Yeah.
Or really great tension where like you kind of know who the person is, but they're like they're really having to work to figure it out.
Yeah.
Here it was like we have a preponderance of evidence and all we're doing is defending ourselves.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why it's like not as fun to watch the second time, right? It's like okay. It's an important part of the thing, and I think it's almost probably more fun to watch having now it being my first time, and I don't know how often this happens. They're in court and they're dealing with that part. That's novel to me in this series, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think that's cool. But I was like, if next you said that about oh, that person is a killer, and I thought, you know what, if they do that next episode, then they will really knock these first 3 episodes out of the park. For like hooking a new audience, because like that's like the other thing that they can sometimes do really well. And then when you go back and you watch it the second time, like those episodes where I'm like, oh my god, that evidence was there the whole time.
Yes. Yeah, like that's
and I just
fun, right?
Is to pull the pictures together for me.
Yeah, there's not on there's not on the second watch through the fun like, oh, they did tell us like early on who the killer was.
Yeah.
We just didn't know how
or
that fit into like a larger story.
Yeah, or even if I could have guessed, but like this was just like
this was like, no, he did it.
This is the killer.
Yeah.
Is the judge gonna agree? And they're WTF, like Grissom pulled a brand new piece of evidence out of nowhere at the end that we had no context for. And so it's like that cheating is the type of WTF I don't like. They're like I call it this is the deus ex machina of evidence, right? It just comes down from the sky and solves all of our problems.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if they hit it out of the park with episode 3. So we'll return next week with season 3, episode 3, Let the Seller Beware. In the meantime, you can visit our website. Who are you? CSIpod.com. But you can also support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search for Who Are You, a CSI podcast. You can do the same thing to find us on Facebook. We are also on Twitter/X and Instagram at Who Are You, CSI Pod. But in the meantime, we will talk to you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.